let's talk about villains. Now, we all know that a hero is only as good as their villain. So, whether it's like a maniacal villain that just wants to destroy everything in their path because of whatever vision they see, or like just a killing machine, like, like a xenomorph, Jason Voorhees, or like a T-1000 type of thing, or like the tragic ones, like Mr. Freeze, who just wanted to save his wife, and you understood where he was going with that, or even Magneto, who had been through like the Holocaust for one thing as a human, and then the mutant genocide that happened later on. You can understand like his distancing away from people, right? The problem is I feel like it's leaning towards one direction, and that's just towards like the tragic hero, which is man, like I understand why you think the way you do, but I don't approve of your methods. And because that's very palatable to people, and it adheres to like the social justice part of our society right now, which is, maybe like this might not be the best way, but this is how we got to get things done, type of thing. But to be honest, a villain is good if they're just insane, right? They're good too if they're just someone who just does things that only they can see. That's not good for anyone else but them. But I think a lot of like people are scared to just write a story like that. Just somebody just absolutely nuts that just does shocking things, disgusting things. And I think one of my biggest pet peeves is when there are villains who are that in their source material, but then they change them into the whole other spectrum for mainstream media because they think that the general audience is not going to get it if they're just like crazy and doing stuff. So let's just talk about a few of those right now. I'd like to start with Thanos in the MCU because in the MCU, his main problem, the driving force, was as just us as organisms were taking up all the resources. His planet was ravaged by it. That's why they died. So now he wants to get the Infinity Gauntlet to eliminate half the universe so there'll be resources enough for people. Okay, people are like, oh, well, I get it. I understand him. He has such like a rational point. He just wants to save life by, we're being wasteful. Stop. Here's the thing. If he has a reality stone, he could have easily just made the resources like unlimited. He could have done that, right? Literally, his gripe could have been solved with like a conversation, right? And so he's not the Mad Titan, which is the name he earned in the comics, and we'll talk about that. He's more like the irrational Titan because he did have an issue. Like, how do we get these resources? Like, how do I make sure that people don't die? Like we're overusing things. But if you had something like the Infinity Gauntlet, which could literally change reality, you could have just made all these resources limitless if that's what you really wanted to do. But no, it was just like an irrational solve. People are like, oh, he's an amazing villain. It's like, if you look at what he was in the comics, right? He literally was just, he was born with a deviant gene, which made him look the way he did. His whole planet didn't look like him like it did in the movie. Like, he looked like that. The rest of his family didn't look like that. He was also insanely powerful due to things that he did to his own self. He became obsessed with death, not just the concept, but the being, that he was able to do anything to appease her, which meant killing everyone. And even if he died, he's like, I get a chance to be with her. This is not a person you can talk to. He's gotta go. When you see him, he's gotta go. That's a villain. That's a villain who will literally destroy everybody to get what they want. And their means make sense to only them. I mean, that's one type of villain, but why change him to the other thing where it's like the logic, like there's no logic to the comic book one. That's just, he's just being destructive. Like, he just wants to do that and you gotta stop him. But the other one is like, if someone just sat down and spoke to him, he probably would have been, it probably wouldn't even happen. It was just very nonsensical, right? And then another one that I think that they took away from him was Eric Killmonger. So in the movie, Eric Killmonger is more like a freedom fighter, right? Like, he's someone who, was wronged. His dad was killed by his brother, the king of Wakanda. He was fighting for like African American white. He's from Wakanda, but he was fighting for African American rights. He joined the Black Panthers and all that, and then like trying to get revenge. And he wants also to use Wakanda's technology to like help Black people all around the world. Here's the thing: it's not who he was in the comic, he was actually he was Wakandan. He wasn't born in America. He was born in Wakanda. He got exiled to America after his mother and father were forced to rebel against Wakanda by Ulysses Claw. And then, he got exiled anyway, even though it wasn't his parents. It wasn't, his parents' fault, which is what drove the revenge part of him. So he went to come back to Wakanda to take over. And pretty much literally his mentality was to make Wakanda great again. That was literally his thing. He was like, well, T'Challa's family has driven this great country into the ground because they want outside influences too. He didn't care about anyone outside of Wakanda. That wasn't his thing. And what made him powerful was that not only did he not need the herb to kick T'Challa's ass, he also could synthesize his own herb and give it to other people. Like he gave it to Casper Kohler or White Tiger. He was also an expert strategist, and he was able to turn people of Wakanda against T'Challa because there were so many people who had the same mentality that he did, extremely xenophobic. But it took away all that stuff from him just to make him what he was in the film, which is to appeal to, I guess, the demographic they wanted to appeal to, people who social justice, and we gotta talk about racism in this. But it's like that's not what the character was. The character wasn't about that. The character had their own plot that was really centered about what happened to them, their parents in Wakanda, and then they turned it to something completely maniacal. Why get rid of that? Another thing that I think is weird with villains is I've seen two really big examples, and I'll talk about this. I talk about this a lot with my friends, is when they build up villains and then their disappointments. So I'll give you an example of one that was very good and one that was really bad. Really good, Voldemort. Now, I'm not a huge Harry Potter fan. I'm a fan, but not I gotta get all the books. I gotta, just people who just love everything about it. But I can say that it built up a villain rather nicely, right? When it came to Voldemort, from the first book, you knew he was a problem. And when he finally got on the scene, when he finally appeared, he killed Cedric Diggory. The first thing he did was kill a kid. You knew the stakes were there. And once him and the Death Eaters got back together, there were real stakes. Main characters died. Sirius, I believe, Professor Lupus, obviously Snape, Dumbledore. They were all casualties just to the whole storyline that still involves Voldemort. Ron's brother. So many people they died because of this man. So you knew the stakes were real. And they always led up to the confrontation between him and Harry. And when it happened, it wasn't they gave you what they told you. And it made sense as to why they stuck with it. They could have had Hermione kill him, but what would that be? It wouldn't serve as a story they just gave you throughout all these books and movies. I thought they handled that. I was very, very good villain. And also, he had some issues as a kid too. And what was his thing? We gotta kill all muggles, people who aren't magical. So, and then he had people, and what made him dangerous was not only the fact that he was powerful, but he was able to convince other people of this craziness, to commit genocide. He was able to do that. So, great villain. The Night King, Game of Thrones. This is how you do it wrong. You build him up from the first episode, winter is coming, which means that literally wherever the Night King goes, winter follows. You build him up as this world-ending threat. And then what happens? You get to the last season, and we deal with him in the middle of the season. This is the one that's supposed to end the world. And we can deal with him before we deal with Cersei? Really? And on top of that, there's no real stakes. There's no real main characters die in this battle. Not Brienne and Jaime that were in the Vanguard. Nobody of note really dies in this? How? Come on. That didn't make any sense. And he got killed how? With 6 of his dudes standing there. Arya sneak attacks him. Him, the dude that raised people from the dead, the dude that threw like a spear and killed a dragon, all of that. You built him up to do all of that to get killed like that. This is what I'm talking about. When it comes to villains, yeah. I think we could do a lot better. It seems like, when we go more in the past, or if we go into a lot of the source material for certain things, when it comes to comic book, movie, those villains, we start to see they have a better understanding in the source material. Or if we go further back into movies, even though Harry Potter, I can't believe it's been a decade already. You go further back, we start to see they understood how to deal with villains. But right now, it's how do we appeal? Or how do we just get rid of the villain very quickly? Not good. We gotta start working on that, right? We gotta make sure we're holding people accountable for stuff like that. And just be all right, man, It's not very good. Like, don't feed it. Like, for that Thanos thing I mentioned, like, don't just be like, oh man, this is amazing. Like, if you like it, you like it. But I would suggest, if you're like a real comic book fan, to look at what you missed out on. That's what I would say. But I'm gonna stop it here. Let me know if you agree. If you're like, hey man, like I agree, like we can do better villains. Or if you're like, no, I love all the villains you named just now. Eric Killmonger's the best, blah blah, and that's cool. Let's just have a conversation about it and let's get it done. All right. So just remember, keep on watching these movies, comics, whatever you like, but just don't forget to enter the nerd.